Hello makers and creatives, I'm Catherine Harris with Sheer Stitchery, and if you're new here, I do sewing and DIY tutorials each week. This week, I wanted to share with you the bubble sleeve cardigan from Rebecca Page. It has these lovely, voluminous bishop sleeves that are gathered in at a cuff here. There's also an option to add pom-poms and little baubles to the end of it. And I am very seriously considering adding some of those on. If I do, I will share it with you in the footage here or on Instagram. Just stay tuned. Let me know if you think I should add some baubles on. I wasn't sure, but I've got a sew along, and then stay tuned because after that I've got a full pattern review. So let's get into that sew along.
Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum.
So we're going to start with the optional baubles or the pom-poms that are on the sleeves. So you've got the markings with X's where you would place them on the sleeves. I didn't do that, so now we're on to the optional inseam pockets. So I folded my pocket in half and I found that that was the perfect placement where the notch is on the pattern. And then I'm going to pin the pocket right sides together and stitch and then serge down. Now because we're working with a knit, you want to turn on a knit stitch or a stretch stitch. So I use the lightning bolt stitch to stitch this in place. And don't forget to ensure that the pocket bag is facing downwards so that you have your pocket facing in the right direction. So once that is all done, it should look like this. Now, what I did to get it to the other side to make sure it's in the exact same spot is I just marked where I had that placement. And you're going to do that on both the front and the back of both pieces that you have. And once we've got all 4 pocket bags sewn in, what we're going to do is we are going to add some elastic tape just to stabilize those pocket ends because it is a knit. So I'm actually adding that in between the seam and the pocket, and we're only going to be adding it to the front pockets. So you're just going to stitch that in place. Now we're going to go to the shoulder seams. So you're going to place the front and the back right side together along the large shoulder seams. And then we are just going to pin, or you could also use clips because it is a knit fabric, and pin that in place. And then I've also stabilized my shoulder seams with this elastic, and always make sure you pre-stretch your clear elastic by stretching it out first and then just stitching it down. So the way that I've done this is I've placed the clear elastic on top, and then I have used my lightning stitch to stitch along here within that seam allowance so that the clear elastic is going to be in the seam allowance and it's not going to overlap onto the outside here. And then I went ahead and serged it, and I'm using a very light heat because number one, it is a knit fabric and it doesn't really press that well, but also you don't want to melt that elastic. Now we're onto the sleeves and the side seams. So you've got quite a large opening for these sleeves, which is great because it makes it oh so cozy. And you're just going to place the sleeve right side together, and I like to pin the ends as well as the middle first. And I do make sure that the seam is pointed towards the back on the shoulder seam where you have the sleeve attaching there. And then you're going to stitch and serge that in place, and your sleeve will begin to look a little something like this. So now that you've got the sleeve all inset, we want to do the side seams and then the rest of the underarm of the sleeve. So with right sides together, we're going to match the seam that joins the intersection of where we set in those sleeves. We're going to make sure that that seam is pointed away from the sleeve, and then we're just going to pin all the way down the sleeve, and then we're going to continue down, matching up where the inseam pockets are. If you don't have pockets, you're just going to sew straight down So we're just going to pin all the way down, but you do notice that there is a notch. So you're going to pay careful attention to that notch. Now I'm actually pinning along the rest of the notch here, but we're only going to stitch up until that notch because we do have a slit in here. So if you will take a quick peek, you'll notice that I have my slit right here. So just make sure that you stop stitching at that slit. And that's what our pockets will look like. And now onto the slits and the bottom hem. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to serge all the way around. So we're going to go along either side, going up and down the slit and along the back piece and then the front side bit. So to do the corner of the slit here, I'm just going to show you on the serger. You're just going to run it through normally, and then as it comes to that intersection, you're actually just going to turn the fabric so that it lies straight. So you don't actually have to turn or pivot. It is wonderful. Next, you are going to fold the hem up, and you're going to have it so that the right side is facing you and then the right sides are together. And we're just going to fold this hem up, and we're going to do that on either side of the slits, as well as just stitching that down. So you don't have to go all the way up to the top. So you will notice that there is an area that hasn't been stitched with that. And we're going to get to that right now. So we're going to press this out. So you're just going to fold it up, and it should be the exact same width as your seam allowance that you used to stitch those side pieces down. And that will give you the slit. And I'm just pinning it in place. Honestly, it doesn't really need pins. It holds quite nicely. But if you have a slinkier knit that doesn't press well, I would suggest using some clips. And then you're just going to stitch that in place just along there. And then we are going to hem the top just with a knit stretch stitch. Next, we're on to the neck front band. So with this, we are going to stitch the center back seam, and it is a curved seam. So not the straight seam, but the curved one is the center back for the neck. And once that is stitched in place, you're going to fold it lengthwise, right side together, and then we're going to finish the bottom ends. So you're going to pin and stitch across the ends on both sides. Because we've already finished the bottom of the hem, we need to finish the bottom of our band. And I am pressing this in place so that it is nice and even. And then I am finding my center back, and I've marked that with a pin. And the center back on our band is actually our seam, so we don't need to worry about marking that. So I like to pin that first, and then I am just going down and pinning and making sure that the bottom of the band lines up perfectly with the front hem. And then once we get this all pinned in place, we're going to pop over to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch it in place and then serge it. Now, you could just serge this in place, but I am a bit finicky and like to do both. I stitch it and I serge it just so my clothes last a little longer. Next, we need to hide those tails from the serger because you don't want to just clip them off because they're going to unravel. So I thread a larger needle, it's a darning needle, and I am just going to hide those thread tails within that seam allowance, pull it through, and now we can clip the thread tails. Now we're on to the sleeve cuffs. We're on the home stretch here. So we are going to fold it and with right sides together, and then we are going to just stitch down here. And then we are going to fold it with the wrong sides together. So you've got both right sides pointing outwards. And then we are going to quarter it. So I am just marking where my half point is, and I'm basing that on the seam that we had just created because that seam is going to match up to the sleeve seam on the sleeve. And you're going to want to mark it on both the front and the back so that you make sure that your cuff isn't twisted when you're doing it. Next, you're going to run a row of running stitches along here, and which is a stitch length of about 5. And I do 2 rows, and then you can just pull those threads so that you can begin to gather up the cuffs and really create that voluminous puff sleeve. So once that's gathered enough, you're going to get your cuff out, and then you're going to place your cuff on top of your sleeve. So you're going to pull your sleeve through the cuff, and both the raw edges will be pointing outwards. And then you're going to match up that same bottom seam. And once you have that matched up, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to match up those dots in which we quartered. So we had quartered the sleeve as well as quartering the cuff. And by matching this up, it ensures that you are evenly distributing the volume in the sleeve, and it makes sure that nothing is twisted when you do stitch it on, especially because you got a lot of fabric going on here with that gathering. And so I am just using a decent amount of pins to really hold it in place, and I actually prefer pins to clips in this case, even though it is a knit, simply because we do have a lot of gathers going in here. And once you've stitched and serged the cuff, you're going to do the exact same thing where we hide the thread tails from the serger within the seam of the cuff. And once you've clipped that, your sleeve is all done and you are ready to go and test it out. So now that we've got the cardigan all stitched up, I thought I would touch a little bit on some of the things I liked and didn't like or would perhaps change in the future. So the pattern does call for any sort of four-way stretch knit, but it did mention that it looks better with a light slinky knit like a modal jersey. And I decided that I wanted something a little bit more beefier because it is cold here in Canada and I tend to run cold. So even in the summer, I'm always grabbing a sweater or a cardigan just to kind of keep myself warm as I'm around the house or even when I'm outside. So I like things just a little bit warmer, and I came across this sweater knit and it actually has like filling inside the squares that creates a bit of loft, so it creates a little extra warmth. I found this at my local fabric land here in Alberta, and I fell in love with the blush pink color and the texture of it because I thought that the texture might look really cool with those baubles on there as well. And I'm actually really happy with it. The sleeves are what I enjoy most about it. Now, these big bubble lantern sleeves are really in right now and really on trend. Is it going to be a fashion faux pas a year from now? I'm not sure, but I am digging them right now. I think they are absolutely cute and adorable and am happy to wear it. And if it goes out of trend, because there is so much extra fabric here, I can always go in and make the sleeves tighter and remove that lantern sleeve later, but why would I want to? Because it is so darn cute. Now, some of the things that I am not particular on is the neckband here. So with the neckband along the back, it does kind of stand up a little bit like you've got a popped collar. And I'm not sure if that's because I'm using a heavier knit as opposed to a slinkier knit that would just kind of crinkle up at the back, but I'm not liking how it lays and how it kind of like rolls a little bit to the front. I think that maybe just something a little different in terms of the neckband, so it's scooped out just a little bit more so it's not nearly as tight. Positive on that, it's going to keep you a little bit warmer because it is tight along the back and you can really wrap it up. And I do find that sometimes when I'm walking, you can see the inside of the stitching here, which I am not a big fan of. I did it in white. I probably should have done it in a matching pink, but I was being lazy and I decided not to change the thread on my overlocker. I have a light overlocker and a dark overlocker, and really, I rarely change the thread on those. And I love that it has some pockets in because I always require a nice pocket. But I am not sure if I like the inseam pockets on this as much as I would prefer a patch pocket. Because it is a slouchy, casual style, I think that a nice front big patch pocket that would fit my phone when I'm going around the house and maybe cleaning or doing some housework and it's not gonna fall out, that would be ideal. I do like the inseam pockets as well, but the thing I don't like about it as much is you can see that gap with the inseam pocket on the side of the sweater, and also on the inside when I open it up you've got this big pocket flap that you can see, and with the patch pocket I just think that it would give a crisper look to it. So if I make this again, I think I'm going to add in some patch pockets as opposed to the inseam pockets. And if you've tried this pattern, I know it is newly released, but if you do try it, do let me know in the comments down below. And also let me know, do you think I should add baubles? Should I keep baubles? Should I not have the baubles? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up. And as always, if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. Until next time, makers, let's get our sewspiration on.